Okay.
Go ahead. No.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our summer survival series. This is actually our last presentation in the series, and we hope you've enjoyed it. All the webinars have been recorded and uploaded to our website at www.spednetwilton.org and our Facebook page if you'd like to go back and review them. Today's webinar is being co-sponsored by Wilton SEPTA. Our topic today is teaching kids to play at a safe social distance. With the opening up again of life, our kiddos may be wanting to get together with friends, attending camps, and hopefully returning to school in the fall. And our presenters today will discuss how to teach our children to maintain safe personal space during these social times. We're thrilled to have Justina Balzar and Megan Cave back with us again for this lesson. They're both board certified behavior analysts with master's degrees in education. They're co-founders of the Hangout Spot, and you can find out more information about them on our website at spednetwilton.org. Also, all the information today from today's presentation, including their PowerPoint, will be uploaded to Facebook and our website as well. Your moderators today are Carolina Corrigan, co-president of SpedNet, Kara Berghaus of Wilton SEPTA, and I'm Janine Kelly from SpedNet. Just a couple of ground rules before we get started. Please feel free to ask questions at the end of their presentation through the Q&A button. Try not to use the chat because with the Q&A button, we can keep track of which questions have already been answered. Also be mindful that this is an open forum that's being recorded, so we can't necessarily guarantee confidentiality, and you may want to just keep that in mind when you're asking your questions, not to reveal anything private. And finally, as I said, the documents will be shared at the end of this presentation, and all documents and information provided in this webinar by the presenters or the moderators are for your informational purposes only and are not intended to replace the need for legal or therapeutic advice. So with that being said, I will turn you over to Megan and Justina.
Great, thanks. Thank you guys so much for having us today. We're really excited to talk to you about our final topic in this series, teaching kids to play from a safe social distance. So to start us off here, I mean, you can see it happening around us, right? Fairfield County, or if you're in our area, and the state at large, is starting to slowly reopen. And there's a lot of things that are uncertain, right? Many places, even though it's nearing the very last day of school, don't really know what extended school year services are going to look like. Camps are getting canceled. Some camps are trying to adhere to guidelines and implement their summer programming. But the options are definitely uncertain, and there's a lot of questions out there. But when Justina and I were thinking about today's topic, there were really two things that we knew were certain. First of all, relationships matter. We know that everything we do at the Hangout Spot is about being social and your relationships with other people. So if relationships matter, we must find ways to continue to promote socialization for our children, particularly as for some of them, any kind of connection to their peers through distance learning is now no longer happening during this time of summer. And the second thing that really came to mind to us is, in real life events are starting to return. Restaurants are opening. People are just being able to have small gatherings at a social distance. And that point right there is really key. So as these in real life events start to return to our lives, social distancing for the near future remains our best defense. So as parents and educators and professionals, we're challenged with this unique question of how do we promote this socialization that's so critical to our children's well-being while teaching our children to maintain a safe social distance or a safe amount of personal space. So today we're going to talk about some strategies you can use with your children to teach that skill that they're going to need to navigate their new norm. Okay, so perhaps the most obvious of all these strategies, because I'm sure most of you have been doing a lot of this already, is to use technology to your advantage. We love to talk about at the Hangout Spot the concept of a virtual playdate. We've done this with many children. I know, Justina, you have done this with some family members, with your own daughter in the past, even before times of social distancing. But you can still have playdates or hangouts or get-togethers using virtual platforms. In fact, I've actually done this with some of my friends, right? We've had a girls' night get-together through some of the different technologies that are out there that allow us to connect with other people face-to-face through a screen. So we actually did, if you check out on our website, which I know the link is posted on your guys' website, but we did a webinar about long distance play dating that goes into that concept in a little more detail. So you can definitely check that out for some more ideas and resources. But the basic concept here is to pick a virtual platform that meets the needs of your play date. So perhaps you're already familiar with Zoom. With a Zoom account, you could do a free play date for up to 40 minutes. Which is a really great experience. You can have as many friends join your hangout as you want. There's also FaceTime, which is really great because you don't need to have a pre-planned time already set up to host your play date. You can call users, as I'm sure you're aware, at any time. The only disadvantage to something like a FaceTime platform is that only Apple participants, users of an Apple device are able to participate in that. So there's a lot of pros and cons to the different technology out there, and you should give careful thought to what makes the most sense for the type of playdate you're going to have. We strongly encourage children to use some of the really cool features that that are included in some of these platforms to facilitate social interaction. So two of our favorites are screen sharing and remote access. So in screen sharing, you can do what Justina's doing right now, right? She has some kind of an activity, in this case, a presentation, on her screen, and you can allow users on the other end to see what you're seeing. This is a really great technology if you visit one of my favorites, 2-player games online, right? You can literally play something like Connect 4, screen share, so that all the participants can see the same game board at the same time. Really useful tool. Remote access is another tool. Again, this one is available through Zoom, where participants can literally draw on your screen. So say I'm playing a game of Pictionary, I can draw on my screen, and then I can give remote access to my friend who can then also draw on my screen. So it's a great way to make what may now start to feel like, okay, I've had enough of this screen operation, I'm ready for real life people time. If you're not able to access that yet, these are great tools to make the experience much more interactive and engaging for students. The last suggestion here on the topic of technology is think about toys and activities you use in real life and use them on the screen. So it's a great opportunity. Earlier today, I was building a block tower with some of my students, right? So I'm building my block tower on my screen, and they're building a block tower on their screen using real materials and real toys. It's a really great way to promote pretend play and share that more tangible hands-on experience that's not quite as screen oriented through the virtual platform. So everything we do at the Hangout Spot is about play and social interactions. And sometimes we give all these strategies and we're finding that it's hard to imagine, right? It's hard to picture what this literally looks like when it's done in a way that's fun and engaging and doesn't feel just like another distance learning experience. Because certainly our kids are burnt out from screen time. They're tired of being on Zoom learning and being in these Zoom room classrooms. So we wanted to paint a picture for you all of the possibilities that exist. So we have a couple videos we wanted to share for you that serve as examples of some fun activities you can set up with your children to use during a virtual play date. They're kind of silly because they're not real kids. It's me and Justina pretending to play. So, bear with us on our acting and role play skills, but we thought it would paint a great picture for you of some of the possibilities that are out there. So I believe the first activity we're showcasing is a game of 20 questions. So we're going to show you how you can use the remote access feature to allow participants to write on the screen as well as a screen share technology. But this is just one example of an activity you could do on a technology play date.
Okay, we're gonna play 20 questions. So here's the rules. The leader thinks of an object from one of the 2 choice categories, but don't tell us what it is, because the other players are gonna take turns asking questions to help discover the item, but you only get 20 questions to figure it out, okay? Awesome, let's give it a play. Okay, so the first 2 categories are sports an instrument? So I've got it in my brain. Go ahead with that. All right. Is it a type of ball? It is a type of ball. Good guess. It's almost like I've practiced this before. It is almost like you practiced this before. Is it a big ball? It is not a big ball. Nope. Is it a little ball? Yeah, it is little. Is it a ball that's used in a game with a lot of team members? I wouldn't say a lot of team members, usually 2 to 4 team members. Is it something that gets hit with a racket? Yeah, it is used in a racket sport. Good guess. I think I know what it is. Is it a tennis ball? You got it. Nice job. You got that in only 5 questions. That was awesome. That was fun. Thanks for playing. Thanks.
Okay. So I hope you enjoyed our acting skills. We have another example for you here. This is an example that would be more appropriate for some younger learners because it's in a way very easy to visualize how you might facilitate a virtual play date for children who have conversational skills or some independent play skills already. But we really want you to think about how for our little ones who are still learning how to play and still developing these skills, you can do that too. And before I dive into that, I do want to review really quickly. So that game is great. That 20 questions game is great for things like asking questions, answering questions, making inferences, accepting feedback from friends. So those are all great skills to target through that type of a game. This game, which is a red light, green light game that you can play, like I said before, using and sharing toys through the screen, is a great opportunity to work on skills like following directions, accepting feedback, right? Prepositions, let's go fast, let's go slow. So there's some really awesome skills, joint attention, imitation skills that you can address while teaching your child these play skills through a virtual play date platform. So here's a look at what it might look like for some of our younger.
Like red light, green light. So when you see green, that means your car should go. And when you see red, that means stop. And you might see yellow, which means go very, very slow. All right, here we go. Ready? Green light, that means go. Beep, beep. Oh, red. Nice job. All right, ready? Green. Red. Uh-oh, I wonder what's gonna happen next. Green means go, 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 quick, quick. Oh, freeze. Okay. Ooh, yellow, go slow. Red, freeze. Green means go. Yellow means slow. Red, freeze. Oh, stop. We did it. Nice job.
Okay, so I hope that paints a picture of some of the possibilities that exist. You can get really creative with this. So I believe on our next slide, Justina, we have a list of some ideas. So here are not even a comprehensive list, but a starter list of all of the games that we have used at the Hangout spot with some of our older children. So we've developed programming for all of these games. You can figure out ways to play these games on your screen just to give you some ideas and get you thinking about the possibilities. On the next slide, we have the same concept, but ideas for little guys, right? So you see our red light, green light there, ball rolling, stone soup, itsy bitsy spider, bingo. These are all activities that you can bring to a virtual play date with your child. So highly recommend all of them, and have some more examples on the YouTube channel if you're looking to scaffold and support these activities with your own children for how you can do that. Okay. So moving on from virtual, because we totally get it. Some of us are over the virtual learning. You know, we're just ready for people time instead of FaceTime. So we wanted to provide you with some really actionable steps you can use to facilitate in-person playdates with a personal space component, adhering to those social distancing guidelines. So the first strategy, I guess I would say, for in-person playdates is to encourage associative play with separate materials. So associative play is a type of play that children engage in where they're doing the same activity side by side, right? Very similar, but there's no common shared goal. Okay, so in using an associative play activity, you eliminate the need to share materials, which is one of the biggest risks when it comes to interacting with other children, right? If you have to share toys and share materials, there's a risk of transmission. So we can eliminate that need here by doing associative play kind of activities. For example, for our little guys, everybody's gonna work on a coloring project. Everybody's got their own set of markers, their own set of crayons, their own coloring page. We're going to sit at the table and do that activity from a distance from each other. We're going to talk to each other about the activity. So I'm going to ask what you're coloring. You're going to ask me what I'm coloring. I can make comments about your activity, but we're not doing the same picture, right? We're not both painting the picture together. And it's a little bit more collaborative than your parallel play experience because we're still having that social interaction piece where we talk to each other about what we're playing. Sandbox play. You have your bucket and your shovel. I have mine. We're building separate structures in the sandbox. We're talking to each other about what we're building. Maybe I'm building an island and you're building a different island, and we're going to toss our people over to the different islands, right? And talk about that, but we're not building one together. Play-Doh. I mean, there's just so many different examples. There are possibilities for older friends too. So Lego masterpieces, I might build a Lego masterpiece. You're gonna build one. Cookie decorating, bike riding, right? The possibilities are really endless, but the idea is we're each doing the same thing. We don't have to share materials, but we can talk to each other and engage each other in that play scheme. And we really encourage you to think about this as a unique opportunity to challenge our children to elevate their pretend play to the next level. Okay, so you can take it a step further. Planning cooperative play activities at a distance. So the difference here is that children are working on a common shared goal together. So if you remember in associative play, you're building your sandcastle, I'm building mine. We're talking to each other about that experience, but we're not building the same one. If I were to transform that into a cooperative play activity, just so you get the concept here, we'd both be building the sandcastle together, one giant sandcastle, right? But obviously there's some concerns related to those types of activities because that usually requires sharing, which in today's world with the guidelines that are currently recommended is a no-no. We can modify these activities to still be cooperative in nature, but give everybody their own set of materials, right? We've talked a little bit about that already, but we encourage you to think about games, cooperative games, that can be played successfully at a distance. So charades is a great one. I can stand at the top of the driveway. You can stand at the bottom of the driveway. I can act out my charades. You can guess it. And that's an awesome cooperative play activity. I Spy, Pictionary with like giant sticky notes that you can see from a distance, right? Those are all awesome opportunities to do something that's a little bit more teamwork oriented, but do it in a safe way. We definitely recommend adapting games so that they can be played with social distancing rules. And this requires some degree of creativity, but if you think about it in advance and you prep your child, it can absolutely be successful. So for example, hide and seek, it's a classic favorite, right? but it requires you to go hide, seek, and find somebody. And to do that, you have to get pretty close to them. You can change the rules of the game. So now hide and seek is played where you seek, but when you find your friend, instead of running up and touching them and say, gotcha, you say something like, oh, I found you, you're hiding behind the tree. Or I found you, you're next to the mailbox. I'm making things up here. But the idea being that you eliminate the need to get in close proximity to other people. You can still play the fun game, but you just do it with some rule modifications that allow for more safety.
Okay, so when kids finally get together, they are going to be really excited, and we cannot underscore really excited enough. That being said, there's also going to be this urge to physically connect, because that's what kids do. That's how kids play. They hug each other, they give each other high fives. So in order to make a real life social distancing playdate successful, it's going to be important to practice these nonverbal greetings ahead of time. One way to do that is to have the conversation with your child and to role play it out. So what are some alternatives that you can do to hugging or to fist bumping or to high-fiving? You can even add a little spin to it and turn it into a secret handshake, which then can also be practiced with the peer that they're going to see ahead of time via a virtual platform first. So they get it down, they get really excited about it, and then when they actually physically see each other, they can coordinate those movements together. To make it even more fun, you can challenge kids to make those greetings nonverbal. So as much as play is the way children know how to play is being challenged with all of these different rules and restrictions that are in place, it's also a challenge for them to use their imagination and elevate it to the next level. So we definitely encourage practicing these nonverbal greetings ahead of time. Otherwise, that social distancing playdate when kids see each other will really quickly turn into no social distancing at all, and that could potentially lead to unwanted exposure. We also encourage you to give children a kid-friendly rationale. So just as we adults are feeling the effects of the changes happening around us, children are feeling them even more in ways that we can't even begin to imagine. This generation will forever remember how their lives were turned upside down. Access to peers was restricted, extracurricular activities canceled, camps canceled, people began wearing masks everywhere, and now as real life events return to our calendars, more restrictions. So it's important to communicate with children to help them along with the process and explain why all of this is happening. And to do that, we encourage you to get creative and to inspire hope instead of fear. As children return to schools and activities and play dates, we want them to be optimistic about the potential that those experiences, in-person experiences, could have for them, as opposed to fearful of all the things that they can't do. We also encourage providing frequent reminders before entering a social space. So coming up with alternative activities and rules is really the easy part, but how do we actually make sure that those rules are put into action, that they translate into behavior? One of the things that we encourage families and parents to do is to provide those reminders throughout of what those rules are. It's hard to keep up with all of the changing criteria for how to stay safe. Now we have new pieces of news coming that from the media and the World Health Organization recently shared that they're thinking it might not be as communicable for people who aren't experiencing physical symptoms but are carriers of it as they had originally thought. So everything is shifting constantly, and it's hard to remember all of these rules. So reminding our kids is really important. We're all guilty of scratching that itch on our faces and immediately regretting that we did, right? So we shouldn't expect our kids to get that right off the bat. We should expect them to, on the flip side, require extra support and reinforcement along the way to be able to adjust to this new way of interacting with their peers' live. So reviewing those expectations before entering the social space is going to be helpful. We also encourage the use of visual cues. So embedding these types of cues into the environment can help remind children of where their personal space is. And there's really creative and fun ways that you can do that. Some things that we've seen floating around online are people drawing chalk boundaries. You think about the personal space bubble and how that used to be taught and still sometimes is taught when we're talking about how close is too close and what the appropriate distance for being apart from someone is. So similar concept, you can draw chalk spaces or use blankets or hula hoops to set boundaries if you're doing a social play date outside on a nice day, and then translating the use of toys that allow for associative play activities or cooperative play activities. You can then set up those spaces with whatever those toys and materials would be, so that limits the need for sharing and is also a visual reminder for children to remain in their space while being social. And then this one, we've shared this in every single webinar, reinforcing the behavior that we want to see more of and being very specific with that. So instead of just a general thumbs up or a good job, saying something like, I love how you're having fun with friends, and giving lots of space. This allows us to have another play date in the future, because the reality is the occurrence of future playdates will be dependent upon us helping our children stay safe when they are interacting socially with their peers. So we have to make sure that we reinforce and we instill those good behaviors and those good habits. So praising will increase the likelihood that your child will engage in the appropriate social distancing play again in the future. And then finally, listening and being available to your child is going to be really important. These are really scary and unpredictable times, and everything that children know about play is being challenged and changed, right? So there's no doubt that they're going to have questions, apprehensions, concerns, and each child may express them differently. If your child is really verbal, they may outright come and have that conversation with you, or make a comment that allows you to make the inference that they're struggling with it. But for children who are less verbal, or maybe who are verbal but are unable to express their emotions in functional ways, that may come in the form of some problem behaviors, such as an agitated or upset tone or body language. Pre-verbal children may even exhibit heightened levels of problem behaviors in response to being denied access to things that they could previously freely enjoy and have available to them, right? So if our kids are in the past used to sharing toys and they don't have the language to be able to communicate or maybe to understand, that can be really frustrating for them. they're not understanding why all of a sudden everything they know about play and interactions, which they thought they knew, has changed, right? So being available to listen, empathizing with your child's concerns, answering their questions the best way that we can is really important. And being patient with our kids. So, as frustrating as this situation is for us, try and put yourself in the shoes of a child who's trying to just learn and understand about the world around them, and it's constantly changing, and they constantly have to adapt to it. And some of the things, some of their fears, or some of the emotions or reactions that they have to situations, to us may appear like it's no big deal, but to your child, it can be a really big deal in that moment. And go back to thinking about when you were a kid and when something really, really upset you and someone told you, well, that's no big deal, or, that doesn't matter, you're gonna get over it. But in that moment, it was a very real emotion that you felt and a very real response that you had. So be patient, be kind, and give each other grace. That's the best piece of advice that we can give you guys. Honestly, it's hard on us, it's hard on our kids. It's going to take repeated practice. It's going to take committed practice. And there's going to be hiccups along the way, but it's possible. And it's something that our children need. It's something that we all need. So the answer is not to just give up and not try. We have to do our best to try and create these social opportunities for our children where they otherwise wouldn't be freely available because of all of these changes. So with that said, we would love to open it up to questions.
And I think we got a few in here already.
Awesome.
So I'm kind of seeing some themes, and as you've been talking, Justina, I was kind of thinking about, these are big questions and big topics and awesome questions, ones we get a lot. So, the two themes I'm seeing is this idea of, before there was a worldwide pandemic, we did a lot of talking about how children were addicted to technology. And now all of a sudden we're saying, okay, put your kid on technology all the time because that's how we learn now. And how do you strike that balance? So it's a really big topic. There's a lot of great strategies we could offer you around how to set those boundaries. We've recommended use of simple things like a first then schedule. There's a lot of really cool technology features you can use, like having the preset timer turn your iPad or device off after a certain amount of time. Cool features for screen locking so that your child can't flip between different activities that they shouldn't be on. So really, really great technology features out there, but also really great behavior analytic strategies that we would recommend. We had, prior to the worldwide pandemic, planned to do a workshop on this topic about how do we go from emojis to emotions, and how do you transition your child from screen time to people time. And unfortunately, there was a worldwide pandemic. So I think we were doing that with Fairfield Library, and unfortunately it got canceled. But we ended up recording that because we thought it was still a really valuable opportunity for families. So that is available on our website, which you can get the link through SpedNet Wilton's website. And we have a full webinar experience on how to establish technology boundaries and teach healthy habits. Because you're right, technology is beneficial, and it, particularly in these times, can be so incredibly useful, but you need to have healthy habits about it. We all know that feeling of, I've consumed too much negative news, right, for the day, and then you feel burnt out and your behavior starts to spiral because now you're burnt out, and we're adults, right? So for our kids, that's challenging too. So rather than try to give you a few strategies that, may or may not fit your situation, I would direct you to that webinar, because I think, we have a lot of content on that may be helpful for you there. The second question that I'm seeing here is this idea of cyberbullying. And I am so glad you asked that question, because And that's one of our big passions. You know, when we think about social skills, there's populations for whom social skills is kind of obvious that it's important for, right? So children with autism and children with special needs, there's certainly value in teaching social skills for children with those needs. But when Justina and I think about social skills, we think about it very broadly, right? So we believe that social skills instruction is important for children of many, many different profiles. And that includes everybody from a child with autism to a child who just doesn't have siblings and doesn't have exposure to peers before school, before entering school, to children who are addicted to technology, as we just talked about, to children who play a role in bullying. Whether they are the bully or the victim of bullying, either way, there are social skills that need to be taught there for that child to be able to navigate the situation or navigate social interactions effectively. There are some really great curriculums out there that we consider when we think about what skills do we need to teach to a child who is being bullied. And they're very nuanced, right? So first of all, you have to be able to identify whether teasing is playful or if it's harmful. And then once you know it's harmful, you have to do damage control in the situation. And when you look at what the evidence-based strategies are for managing cyberbullying as it's happening to you in the moment, it's things like, do I know to go ask a same-age peer who's my friend to stand up for me, right? On that Facebook thread or wherever, Instagram, wherever that's happening. Do I know to avoid that person, right? Do I know to sign off of social media once I identify that something harmful is happening? Do I know to maintain evidence of it and print it so that I can take it to a trusted adult and get support? So those are all skills that need to be taught to children. We have a Empower Me series where we tackle topics like this because it's so important in today's world. And we talk about what are the skills that you need to demonstrate and how do you handle that when you're being bullied, whether that's in person, on the internet, physically bullied, verbally bullied. The skill set is very different depending on what the situation is. So it's a very, very nuanced skill. I think that if this is a concern for your child, there's a lot of teaching that needs to happen in order to ensure that your child is able to manage those situations effectively on their own. So again, we take a good look at the peers curriculum when we think about that teaching, if you're interested in checking that out. But, you know, certainly an individualized component needs to come into play. And until you know that your child has mastered those skills and able to apply them to the situation, there's going to need to be some degree of adult facilitation and adult support, right? And that's where some of those technology protections that I talked about from the technology lens that may become useful, right? So you can set up your Zoom room so other friends aren't coming in there, and you can set it up so that you can't switch back and forth between other platforms. And you can set it up so that when the 30-minute hangout that you're supposed to be on with your friends is over, the device turns off. So I think taking a look at those two resources might provide some guidance there, but those are great questions and kind of worthy of a whole webinar in and of themselves. So I hope that answers your question. Justina, do you have additional thoughts on either of those topics?
You covered it all. I'm having a hard time figuring out how to see questions. I'm convinced that when you are when you're hosting and actually showing screen sharing that you can't
see it. Well, I can read them to you. The last one we have on this screen is a shorter, easier one. So what age groups do you mean when you say older kids and little guys? So at the Hangout Spot, we service children up to 18 years of age. So I guess those adjectives probably aren't the best to describe things, right? Because your little ones could be a 2-year-old. They could also be a 6-year-old. You know, an older child could be 10 or it could be 16 or 18, right? So, you know, we have discovered really engaging ways to provide these experiences for children. I think I was using those terms in regards to the virtual Playdate experience. So we have found ways to do that experience for children up to 18 years of age. So it's doable. But that being said, an 18-year-old is not going to like the same things that a 13-year-old is going to. Definitely not, right? So everything that you do in play in general, not just if you're hosting a virtual play date for your child and peer, everything you should do should be individualized, right? Your 13-year-old may not be into exactly what other 13-year-olds are into right now, and you should definitely give thought to how you can individualize that experience to make it fun and meaningful for all of the participants. The activities we posted on the screen, so developmental play groups, you're really probably looking at like 2 to 6 or 7. And then your older kids, as I called them, 7 to maybe around 11 and 12. But we could certainly, I'm not going to lie, I completely played the draw something game with my friends who are 30. So, the games that are fun for some of our little friends or our older friends are fun for us when we're young adults too. So there's great applicability for all age ranges and definitely possibilities out there. I hope that answers your question. And those were all of them, Justine. So I don't know if there's any others that you want to throw our way, but we're happy to answer any that you've got.
I think, do you have any suggestions for older? Like there's one in the chat here who's 16.
16, yeah.
If there's any strategies for that generation.
A good question. Justine, do you have any, or you want me to throw out what I was thinking?
So I guess I need a little bit more clarification. Is that strategies for how to socially distance, or is that games that you think that a child at that age could play?
It is in it wasn't really a question. She thought this webinar was for older kids, or
I mean, so
I would say maybe suggestions of what they can do for a 16-year-old.
So the strategies here can apply, I think, and can be adapted across age levels depending on a couple of different factors, right? So you could have a 16-year-old who's lower functioning and into Disney movies, in which case you can play some of those other games with that child and with their peers. There's also other fun games that can be adapted, like Apples to Apples, which is for older kids. What Do You Meme, I think, is one of those that we listed, where kids can, whether that be virtual or in person. There's an in-person card game similar to Apples, and you can adapt it to a virtual screen if you're doing something using something like Kahoot, where kids can vote. But essentially you get to caption your own picture, or you get to caption a picture with a funny title. So everyone is probably familiar with what memes are online. So that's a fun activity to do with kids. Working on conversations or around preferred topics is another great one. There are also a lot of interactive board games that older kids like to play. Again, I can't remember the website that you had shared.
Yeah, I think it's twoplayergames.org or .com, but they have like really cool games that are all multiplayer games you can screen share.
Yeah, so there's a variety of things that you can do there. You can also adapt card games in person, where, for example, games such as War, Solitaire, all those types of games can be played with separate materials from a safe social distance. So it really depends on what your child is into. So finding what their interests are, and then from there selecting games and activities that would be appropriate. There's experiments that kids could do. I think there's a really cool website. I forget what the name is, but it's been advertised all over social, where you can pick a STEM type of experiment, and again, you can have 2 if you're doing social distancing, and have the kids play around with trying to make it work, and troubleshooting and problem solving. Let's see, word 5-second rule are really great for, yep. So all of those are really great. 20 questions, games that make you think on your feet, Pictionary, right? Charades, all of those games are games that we as adults sometimes play when we're with other people. Cornhole is another great one. If you're doing a socially distanced play date, everyone has their own set of bean bags. You can easily maintain social distance, because I believe the official rule of cornhole is to keep the two cornholes at least 27 feet apart. So that's way more than the suggested social distancing guidelines.
Yeah.
So there's definitely many ways that you can adapt. But again, it really all boils down to what's your child motivation, and then from there, seeking out games and activities that could play off of that, or that can be adapted to that. Because there are many things that we found, many games that we could change that maybe initially or at face value, when you read what they're rated for or recommended for age-wise, would fall within, maybe the 3 to 5 year old range. There's ways that you can adapt them for older learners as well. So really, really broad question, but I would encourage you to start with the motivation and then go from there.
And I think you made a good point, Justina, like the strategies, when we talk about behavior analytic strategies, right? And of course, these are general and all need to be individualized for your children, but the strategies are kind of applicable across age groups. They just look different. So for example, we talked about how you're going to give your child reminders before you enter a social space. For a toddler, that might look like kneeling down on their level with a picture representation of, a personal space bubble or what have you, and saying, remember, first we're going to walk into the playground, making that up, playgrounds aren't open yet, but you know what I mean, right? Then you're going to keep your personal space bubble. Okay, what are you going to do? And really breaking it down. A teenager, if you do that to a teenager, is not going to be very happy with you, right? But I know that as parents, we remind teenagers of the rules every time they leave the house. It looks different, right? Remember, I expect that you're going to maintain your personal space when you see your friend down the driveway or, wherever they're going. So it's the same strategy. It just looks different, right? Teenagers aren't going to want to sit in hula hoops to maintain personal space boundaries. They're going to look at you like you have 10,000 eyes and say, forget you, and walk out the door. But I am in Stanford, and there's a beautiful green up by Harbor Point. And I thought it was the coolest thing ever that they took chalk and they drew chalk circles on the green for all the young adults who need a little bit of prompting to maintain personal space, right? So there are really cool ways that you can do that for a teenager. They're going to come off like kind of cool and fun and different, that are unique. Beach chairs in the driveway and setting them up at a distance. So you just have to modify the strategy to be more appropriate for your age group, but definitely do some thinking about, the strategies at their core are certainly applicable across ages. Just they look a little different in their application. So that's a really great question. 2 more suggestions on that from my own personal life. So Netflix Party is great for older kids. So it's a free Google Chrome extension where you can, if you have Netflix, play a movie, and friends in different places using that extension can all watch the movie at the same time and comment to each other through the app. So if you want to have a virtual movie night with older teenagers who, you're not quite comfortable sending your child to someone's house for a movie night, but we know teenagers like movies, right? You can all watch the same Netflix show and engage in conversation, and it's live. So everybody's watching the exact same screen at the same time. It's a really cool one. I've done that with my friends. And then House Party is the other one that's out there. Have to be a little bit careful for teenagers who need some social media rules because the disadvantage to House Party is anybody can jump into the house party at any time. So if your child is hanging out with their friends in their house party and some Joe Schmo comes from the high school and is hanging out in the app, they can jump into your child's house party without any warning. There are features to lock the room so people can't jump in, but you have to make sure your child is using those strategies. But that's really cool because it allows you video chat. So you get the audio, the video, and there's games built in. So there's a version of Draw Something, which I was telling you about, where you draw pictures like Pictionary. There's a version of Apples to Apples built in, Heads Up. So they're all on the screen and already, I don't know what the word is, like configured to the platform. So really cool, and just make sure you have the security features enabled. Those are really great for teenagers and for young adults too, and adults. I feel like my parents play with House Party sometimes, so it's a great one. Highly recommend it. Were there other? I see something in the chat, but I can't figure out how to get in there.
No, there was just a comment.
Oh.
Thank you. Netflix is a great one.
Yeah, Netflix is fun.
But other than that, there's no other questions in the Q&A.
Great.
So we'll give it like one of those awkward Zoom minutes and see if anybody's typing.
You're so welcome. I hope
for joining us.
Helpful, Sanji.
I'm wondering if the Pro version has like music while you wait.
Maybe.
Always pipe it in.
I know. I was like, should I just turn my phone on? Like,
Yeah.
In my head, I hear near, 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 near.
By the time you can go back to real life workshop experiences, they'll have it, right? Right in time for you.
I know. All right. Well, I don't see anything, and I'm seeing a little bit of people are dropping out. So.
Okay. Well, thank you guys so much. This was really fun. It's been such a pleasure to work with you all, and we hope you found some useful content in this.
Yes, thank you.
Great. This was great.
Yeah, thank you. This has been really great. Thank you for participating in this series with us.
Yeah, and I think these will be videos and that parents will refer back to. I think there's so much good information in here that they'll go back and rewatch, for the tips. I think it'll be really helpful.
Yeah.
And keep us posted on everything you guys are doing so we can, share and spread the word and refer, to you guys as you guys get up and running. We don't want to overload you, but I know lots of parents are looking for options for the summer. So,
Great.
All right. So I'm going to go ahead and close us out. All right.
Bye.
Thank you guys.
Bye.
All right. Take care.